Hello everyone. I hope this means that I'm online. I'm just going to check. If you are here and if you can see me, please say hello. I'm just checking that that's also working on the LinkedIn and hopefully YouTube. Okay, I'm just checking. This is okay, great. Hello everyone. Apparently I am live. I'm just going to be super careful and check again and probably see myself looking at the tag. Here we go. Okay, great. Hello everyone. I have my my usual tech fiasco behind the scenes, but it's all good. We are going to start. And today I want to talk about this topic that so many of us seems to be interested in very unexpectedly. There are over 100 people who signed up to this, despite probably only talk about it twice. So thank you so much for joining me. That's obviously a huge appetite for what the ADHD and women experience look like beyond the DSM-5 traits into our human experience. And I just want to own up that it has been a really tough day for me because I was looking after two kids and one of them was ill the night before and I didn't really sleep very well. So today has been a bit of a roller coaster, but I guess it also makes the ADHD experience, more authentic because I'm not going to pretend to be this very regulated, calm person. But maybe also, even if there are so much, underlying storm beneath the surface, we may always appear as if we're dealing with things okay, on the surface. And I think that really depicts the ADHD experience. So just to calm myself down and also hopefully co-regulate where everyone, you're very welcome to co-regulate with me and breathe together. Yes. So I'm going to do a very simple box breathing and you're very welcome to join. It's going to be so quick. It's going to be two goes of box breathing. Breathe in to the count of 4. Hold it in for the count of 4 and then let go. Exhale for the count of 4 and then we do it again. So if you just bring your attention back to yourself and breathe in to the count of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 and hold for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and then we go again. Breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And exhale for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so you can bring your awareness back to the room. So today I'll be running a LinkedIn webinar. I think this will also be streamed onto my YouTube channel, ADHD Girls. I'm going to take you through some of the results that we received from the ADHD Women Survey around the questions that we asked them that was pretty pressing around what they hope to see in the field of diagnostics and support. And I hope I do the results justice. Well, it's really hard not to because it's really just based on our collective lived experience. And I see it as a collective truth with a lot of little anecdotes, basically from myself and other people who I have supported and also who have taken the survey. So let's start. So who am I? I am Dr. Samantha Hiew. I founded ADHD Girls when I was diagnosed at the age of 40 with ADHD. And it was... oh, someone said, has this started yet? I'm not seeing anything. Apparently, there are people who just see things. So let me know if that works or if I've dropped off. But if not, I will definitely check again. Sorry about that, guys. I'm just checking. Does it look like if someone can see, and it's not frozen, just give me a sign. Give me like a thumbs up. I don't know why. It seems to be frozen. You're right. Oh, I'm not seeing anything. Oh, yes, I have that now. So can you see anything now? I don't know what's happening. Internet connections. Oh, great. Is it working? And say hello. Hmm. Okay, so someone's saying it's all working for them. Great. So there's one person. I hope this carries on. Oh, great. Awesome. Okay. So I founded ADHD Girls when I was diagnosed at the age of 40 with ADHD. And it took me a further 4 years before I finally received an autism diagnosis. And it was barely really an easy experience. It was actually really challenging. In that time, I have worked with the community. I have been a keynote speaker, training organizations, healthcare education, workplace settings on neurodiversity through an intersectional lens. And I've also founded the AuDHD Intersectional Scientific Practitioner Program based on my difficulties in getting a diagnosis as a cross-cultural woman who perhaps does not present in the way that people expect. And I've also received some awards. One of the ones that I love to have received is based on the work that I did with the community, the support that I have, having shown up at many different public talks about women with ADHD. And I see that as pretty much the community supporting me alongside me supporting the community, because I was going through quite a huge life transition in the last years since founding ADHD Girls and navigating a divorce, co-parenting, and restructuring my entire life, writing a book. I have learned so much and changed so much in that time. I'm no longer even the same person as the woman who started ADHD Girls. And to date, I'm also a mother to a 6 and an 11-year-old neurodivergent kids. And so much of my learning really began from learning how to hold a safe space for them and myself in this quite interesting transition, quite difficult, but also full of joy. So what do I do? When people ask me what I do, I never know what the straight answer is. And if you are ADHD, you might have been through a similar career trajectory where you have had so many different interests and careers. The squiggly career, that was pretty much my experience. But when I was diagnosed with ADHD at 40 and then received the autism diagnosis, I really made it a point to figure out what was a more inclusive experience, what was behind, the complaints that I was getting from the community, where they said that so much of diagnostics and support does not adequately address their existential struggles. So I wrote the book Tip of the ADHD Iceberg to find out the hidden layers beneath the tip of the iceberg, which is the surface behaviors that people tend to see and what clinicians will call observable behaviors. And I've received some really lovely messages actually from people who say this book belongs in every single community spaces, teaching hospitals and psychiatric hospitals, workplace and education settings, just because it is such a human angle to looking at neurodivergence. I also created an AuDHD advanced practitioner program to teach people what autism and ADHD look like in women through a scientific and intersectional lens. And really, I see it as a way to challenge the system and to empower neurodivergent women, because we have not had our research. And because of that, I created our research. I also created the Totty framework. It is Totty very lovingly nickname after tip of the iceberg. So what it really is an onion layer framework that helps psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, anyone who diagnose and support us to see the layers that are perhaps invisible in a neurodivergent woman's life and make the implicit, that is unconscious and hidden, and make it explicit. So that's more, so people don't really don't have to shoot in the dark. They can just point to what layer it is that people really need support with. So where it all began, ADHD Girls was really born from my existential crisis of having been in a squiggly career for over 10 years and not knowing where in the world of work I belong. And in that time, I have been working in 16 different industries. I have become a mother. And then I founded ADHD Girls in order to figure out what happened to me and what happened to everyone. And so much of what I do is to increase present representation is a big word to increase representation of more intersectional stories of those from underrepresented groups like women, people of color, global majorities, cross-cultural individuals, and mobilizing a mission and state that case for change and really encourage people to advocate for themselves and empower them to do so. So I think a lot of my work really began from this iceberg picture. Can you see it? I can't see anything. This has been a very cool experience so far. If there's any challenges with seeing things, then I'll probably re-record this and put it on YouTube. Okay, just let me know if you can see it. So the female ADHD iceberg is the first iceberg picture that people have said they really resonated with. I think what was interesting about this picture is that I created this because so many people were labeling women with ADHD as inattentive, anxious, and depressed people pleasers, when actually that's such a rich story that underlies our experience. And this is really when I created this bit beneath the tip of the iceberg. This was actually someone had said, even though it was quite a lot of experiences, that may paint a neurodivergent women's life, like, instead of hyper active, we're hyper social, hyper reactive, hyper internalized, right? A lot of the hyperactivity was internalized. And there was this was actually reframe. So instead of being controlling, I kind of reframe our experience that actually we have a need for control, actually, and then demanding high standards of people, often irritables, self-harm, and all these things, right? But actually a really big part of it is, potentially there's all these things going on, that women with ADHD are overwhelmed, we may be perfectionists, there is a significant hormonal impact. And as a woman in my 40s, I can tell you hand on heart that hormones, the roller coasters that a perimenopausal women go through every month is no joke. And early this year, I managed to go on hormonal replacement therapy, which really smoothed my AuDHD presentation a lot better. And my nervous system had that to thank, because I spent the last few years actually trying to figure out how to counter the impact of ADHD medication. Because I developed a side effect from ADHD medication. But a really, really big part of what is happening to neurodivergent women is the gender roles, the female generational burden that is invisible and it's given to girls and women from a very young age. We may have co-occurring conditions as well, and in my case, it was certainly true. But with all these complexities, people were saying to me, hang on, I can't help but to think there is another layer beneath this layer. So that was what my book was about. I ran and figured out what was going on, because up until that point, I was diagnosed with ADHD and self-identified as autistic. So no one really knew what autism looked like in women. And then what on earth is AuDHD? Because all of a sudden, after receiving an ADHD diagnosis, this was in early 2021, people were saying, oh, what about autism? Because we are hearing stories when people start ADHD medication, the stimulants tend to then bring the autistic traits to the fore. And the same happened to me. And we were like, okay, we must be AuDHD then. But what is AuDHD? Is it autism plus ADHD? Is it as simple as that? With these Venn diagrams that people tend to put together? Is it a paradox, like contradiction? I've come to realize it's not always. And is it the same for everyone? Hell no. Right. So what does autism look like in women? This was my story of trying to receive a diagnosis. And this happened like 4 years after my ADHD diagnosis. I was very comfortable in being self-identified. And I thought, nah, no need for a formal, assessment. But the NHS contacted me and said, finally, we have you on the top of the list. That was 4 years after I put in my referral. And then they were like, okay, do you want to come and, get assessed for autism? I was like, okay. So I wanted to see what the system looked like. And I went in having not done any research, not like I did with ADHD. I felt like I was really acing an exam with ADHD because I really wanted to get the diagnosis. But I was so confident I would get an autism diagnosis. I was like, no problem. I'm just going to go in and be myself. No masking, just going to be me. And then, wow. So it took me 3 times being denied of that diagnosis, which was both a shock and a revelation, because I then sent my assessors to clinical psychologists who were actually women. They didn't, actually, I don't think they really knew what autism really looked like in women. None of us really did. I looked at all these different books, you only have live experience anecdotes. And so many of the research were done based on male samples. So it took me 7 months and actually 4 different sessions, which were all very re-traumatizing. It was so re-traumatizing that when they did not give me the diagnosis, I cried. And they were probably traumatized by me crying, because it was just so hard to have to recount all the ways in which I've been traumatized in relationships, because so much of autism assessment is about, what was it? Have you ever struggled to make friends? Are you good with people? How do you see friendships? What are relationships like in your life? How do you communicate with people? How do you socialize? How do you see yourself? And how do you see other people? Can you live independently? Can you do all the things that I have had to learn? I'm also 44, Maybe I didn't know that. I didn't know how to live by myself at the age of 21. But I had to learn. I came halfway around the world when I was 23, and I had to learn to live by myself. I've had 23 years to do this. So I knew a lot of the things that they thought autistic individuals didn't know. And because of that, a lot of my challenges were put down to trauma. And it so happened that I was also going through the assessments during my divorce. And my ex-husband was my developmental witness, which I shouldn't have asked him to be. But I didn't think that my mom would really do me justice, because maybe she didn't know how I lived for the last few years. I've left home since I was 23. But it was a mistake. And so they didn't give me the diagnosis. But after a lot of back and forths, I sent them a lot of papers. And still, I wasn't really convinced, because those papers didn't really explicitly study autism in women. And it wasn't until after my diagnosis in April this year, Gina Rippin, she published a book called Lost Girls of Autism. And with this book, it went into all the research that shows us what autism looked like in women. And some of the things that Gina was talking about was actually validated by my own research. And I'll tell you what I did. Okay, so I was like, who does and what does AuDHD look like? And I realized that we know nothing. All the talks about AuDHD being a contradictory paradox. Yes, but not all the time. It also doesn't look the same between men and women. Often I have been described as a mystery wrapped in an enigma, Jekyll and Hyde. So many words that I have internalized, and I have also been mislabeled with things that I've talked about in my LinkedIn articles. And I really feel that there's this gross misunderstanding, and our experience have been oversimplified. So because of that, from everything I went through, and also what I've heard of the community, because it wasn't the first time that I've heard of somebody being turned away or dismissed from a autism diagnosis when they are ADHD, because people just didn't know where to look. So from that, I channeled the electricity and the anger into creating the first AuDHD women survey, where we asked women who identified with both autism and ADHD. Some of them have had a dual diagnosis. Most of them don't have one diagnosis out of the two. And we've asked them, what has been your experience? What does AuDHD look like for you? You know, the autistic side, and what does the ADHD side look like? And then we analyzed the data. We looked at also hormones and relationships, and what happens, you know, in the psychiatric profession when they try to get a diagnosis, what kind of support they are getting, you know, what motivates them. It was really in depth. And we presented the data to the community, where over 220 women turned up to learn about the AuDHD experience. And I'll share some of it now. So what people have said, the AuDHD women have said, that the top barriers that are faced by them were that their symptoms were dismissed and misattributed. 74% of them have said that. And then 73% have said that there is misunderstanding by professionals and family, and there is a lack of post-diagnostic support. Most people often feel like there is literally no support after diagnosis. They fall off the cliff, and 60% of them said that. So this is kind of an anecdote, you know, that people have shared. And some of our survey respondents have said, if our systems were designed for 6-year-old boys, what happens to adult women whose sensitivity and intelligence have camouflaged their pain? I very, very much agree with this, you know, and I'm a year down, you know, doing this research now, but I have lived with AuDHD all my life. You know, so much of our challenges are internalized, and there is a very real reason for it. It's just the way we are built. You know, so much of what we are about is containing that energy, and eventually, if we don't release it, we become sick and ill. So, and this some of the results from our AuDHD women survey, where people were saying there were malpractice in diagnosis, support, coaching, and therapy, where there's systemic negligence. A lot of people were dismissed and gaslit. Everyone is getting a diagnosis these days. They were told there were gender bias. This is definitely me. Traits too mild or appear to be mild. Too articulate. Too successful. That's a big one. A lot of high achieving women who struggle to get diagnosed. And then people were saying this is inaccurate, male-coded, irrelevant to adult women's lives. And they're basically saying that we've been compared to a standard that isn't us our entire life, and supported based on this standard our entire life. And I've known this from being diagnosed to receiving support in coaching and therapy. It has not been the adequate support that I felt, you know, really helped me throughout my life. And what has helped me more is having friendships who could really truly see me and witness me. Actually, this also came out in our survey later. So as I said before, 60% received no support after diagnosis. On CBT and general therapy, people say were unhelpful and invalidating, but this is very generalized, okay? So I think people who are doing a good job at tailoring, you know, these modalities and this support to the neurodivergent affirming lens, you know, it would certainly help. And there was some anger around workplace malpractice, because workplaces seem to have taken these token inclusion policies without looking at our nuances, and often will mistake burnout for incompetence, which is quite difficult, because for neurodivergent women, if they suffer from burnout, from containing all these things that they don't tell people because they don't even know how that burnout happens, then they feel like it's a bit unjustified to them, you know, be called incompetent for what they didn't understand or not being supported with. So this tends to be something that actually a lot of the neurodivergent women I support in the workplace tend to tell me that this hits them most during the performance review stage. And so I wanted to really highlight here the very important layer that we have perhaps missed in this story when we look at labels as labels, is that what we miss is, and from my angle and from the community that I've supported, is the woman's story. Okay, it's going to be different for you, for your identity, if you're a man or you're trans and non-binary. And what I'm saying is that there is a gross underrepresentation of our experiences in all the main places that diagnose and support us. Okay, for me, understanding the female neurobiology, the hormones, stress regulation, understanding that that is different to a male neurobiology, hormones, and stress regulation for neurodivergent men. And there has also been such a lot of intergenerational trauma that's transmitted due to this misunderstanding and lack of perhaps self-awareness, and then unknowingly transferring it onto our next generation. And so many of us now at this age, we are somewhere in the middle between, generations that never really validated emotions with the next generation that is all about breaking the cycle, So there is a lot of trauma in the community that is that is from this experience of the female generational burden. And if you can see all these different stages and the ages and stages, we'll see a different manifestation as well of neurodivergence and in an AuDHD woman, as well as the hormonal changes that happen from puberty, perimenopause, pregnancy, after childbirth, and then menopause, post-menopause. And there is such an important area to focus on, to understand the link between hormones, sensory regulation, trauma, and masking. And so I said, no one really knows what ADHD looked like, but then the scientific research had been doing this research. It's just that they were doing it and they were reporting it in a way that people couldn't read these codes. So then we were talking about some of the scientific papers in my program, and one of it where they show distinct brain dynamics in those with both co-occurring autism and ADHD, or ADHD, very distinct from either pure ADHD or pure autism. And they surmise that AuDHD is a different neurotype altogether, and it's different to pure ADHD and pure autism. But what is quite similar between AuDHD and autism is the autistic social communication pattern, that AuDHD is also different to pure ADHD. So what we tend to see in the AuDHD community is that there is a lot of similarities in the social communication pattern of an autistic woman. And so much of our trauma has arose from relationships and masking AuDHD's way of being. The research has showed us that autistic women are very much wired to connect and find a lot of reward in social connection. The challenge is more in maintaining that connection. And actually, one of the biggest challenge is that we can't read people's intentions very well. And even if we do read them, I think what it is that we are quite hyper-vigilant to cues, so social cues and change in tones and patterns, but it is the making sense of what that is that often is where people trip up. And the literal thinking, reading something and treating that thing as face value, not questioning it. You can see how being this way may have caused some kind of social, relational, challenges throughout your life if you didn't have people around you who could tell you whether something was right from wrong. And so many of us didn't have that guidance. Some of us did, and it certainly is a protective experience. But I didn't, and I got into a world of trouble when I left Malaysia to come here to live and study, because I kept landing into the wrong crowd. So with AuDHD, the thing is, it's so different to autism and ADHD. If you think of a neurotype that at any one time could have two opposite states, whether it is that need for control and structure and routine, or that need for flexibility and room to maneuver, But AuDHD, ADHD looks very much like cognitive over-flexibility. So these states, when they shift, you can go from being very controlled and safe and stable for a long time, and then something happens in your life and you can flip. And those triggers could be anything, whether it's life transitions, relationships ending, or you're just sick of being boring. And then you'll flip to the other side, and the ADHD can really manifest and can look very, very different. So these two different states can be seen when you're trying to kind of be productive, you are trying to work. You could be very hyper-focused one day, and you could get too deep, and it's a very energy-intensive experience. But then the other side of that is that you can flip from that to the next day being totally hypo-focused, where you feel flat and you don't feel motivated, or not at all. So people can get brain fog or paralysis in this state. So this is a nervous system that is wired for intensity. It's wired for intensity, for pattern spotting, emotional resonance. And it is not wired in a typical way that neurotypical seems to have. So we are either really switched on or kind of not, and find it hard to switch on. And as for me, I really couldn't make the slides until today, no matter how much I try to look at it. It's just a coping strategy that's existed. I relied on stress to get me going, and that can be quite hard. And so this is a nervous system that's constantly negotiating not just dopamine, but also stress, cortisol, GABA, serotonin, oxytocin, and sex hormones. This is a very small, section just on hormones, but I think it's really important. I go into it a lot more in my work and my program. But this, I thought it'd be interesting to see the difference between, sorry, this figure is quite tiny on my screen. So I'm trying to see between the difference in estrogen all throughout someone's life until perimenopause. And then when menopause tend to go down. So perimenopause, it's the 10 to 15 years before menopause, which is the one day when your period eventually finishes and you don't no longer menstruate. And there is a big drop as well in terms of estrogen after that. But we go through fluctuations that we don't really fully understand. And the research now has shown that an AuDHD women's nervous system is actually quite different to even, the ADHD women's nervous system, where, when people expect the only difficult time in a month with hormones is luteal phase, but we also have challenges during going towards ovulation, because of the interplay between, the sex hormones and histamines and the co-occurring conditions that someone may have, like POTS and AMCAS and EDS. So I just went very briefly into the science there. I'm going to go back to the next bit. Okay. So what AuDHD women want to see in psychiatry is that instead of us trying to manage symptoms, that we can go and look at the whole person, this whole person. And I would even go as far as to say that the whole person is like, cross-cultural. That person could be cross-cultural. It could be their life stages. They could be a mother. They could also be going through hormonal transitions. Their relationships may or may not be supported. And, this is all the layers that make up a person apart from the neurodevelopmental wiring that people are looking for. Because in my Totty framework, I have the onion layers that make up a neurodivergent AuDHD women's life. So when psychiatry is trying to find the neurodevelopmental wiring that is at the core of us, but they don't see the masking, the camouflaging, their gender roles and demands, the hormones, the relationships and support network, the strengths that are helping us hide our pain. So much of what we can do is actually pretty amazing as AuDHD women. And so much of how we present can look so typical that we trick even ourselves. And for me, it has been so much realization that I have been so ableist to myself because I didn't know myself. I have, because I knew I was on ADHD medication for like at least 3 years. I could work really well. I forgot what it was like to be like an ADHDer, because the difficulty focusing has sometimes been an issue for me, but more of it was the impulsivity and the challenges with emotions when it comes to relationship, but I've been working through a lot. But because I was looking okay to the outside world, I didn't realize that I was actually struggling internally with internalized ableism. That it was only until I was withdrawing from ADHD medication when I started to have heart palpitations and symptoms that made it difficult for me to breathe, because I was going through so much stress in my life at the time. Then I had to lower the dosage of medication, and that's when I had such bad side effects, and the withdrawal. Every month, I would go back to ruminating nonstop. And the only respite I would get is when I was going towards ovulation. And I remember what it was like to have ADHD. I remember what it was like to worry so much, to doubt yourself, to think that you don't amount to anything, and actually just to feel like completely like nothing. And I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but that is some of the experiences that I had to go through being in perimenopause, with my hormones and nervous system firing like a disco ball and not having the support that I needed. And I actually thought that if I didn't have me, I would die. Like, honestly, that was the thought that was going through in my head, because every place that I went for support, I had to bring the knowledge of myself when I didn't know how it connected. But that's why I started doing this research, and I really start to look at, because I had a background in genetics, I looked at our DNA gene variants, that can cause difficulties in getting rid of the neurotransmitters that the ADHD medication too readily provides to my nervous system. So what was happening to me over the period of 3 years was that the neurotransmitters were accumulating in my brain without the clearance of it. And that wasn't just the neurotransmitters from the ADHD medication, dopamine and norepinephrine. It was also estrogen wasn't being cleared, and all this has a knock-on effect, because we are looking at a system that needs to be in balance when its natural state is in flux. And that's what I've had to learn, to integrate both what I know about our neurodivergence with holistic measures. And I really adopted like nutrition, supplementation, and nervous system regulation, lifestyle changes. But I think the most radical change I've ever had to make was relationships, because I knew that there was some suppression inside me, the things I didn't say, the no I didn't say no louder, and a life that I didn't really fully choose. So I dismantled all that and reconstructed, and it was so hard. But I also know that it was really worth it, because I started having a sense of peace that I never had before. So to understand a whole person, really requires a new diagnostic framework that really works for ADHD women. That is intersectional, gender-informed training, recognizing the links between hormones, trauma, sensory regulation, integrating psychiatry and holistic lifespan support. This is what ADHD women said in my survey. And this is what they said also. I didn't say it. I was like, whoa, we are deep carers and thinkers. We're very deep. You'll apply our approach in 20 years anyway, so get out of our way. I think they're trying to say that lived experience truly have a place. And if science or clinical practice is going to apply our approach in the future, then maybe let us do our thing and actually let our voice be heard. I think that is what is trying to be conveyed here, and I truly agree. And this research, I really love everything that was said in it, because it was so validating. It wasn't just what people wanted in diagnosis, coaching and therapy. They also said what they wanted in relationships, and it was so validating. I've shared it in my LinkedIn articles, but there were more. And this is what they wanted in a support space and diagnostic place is validation, clarity, practical regulation support, not performance coaching. And this is really interesting because so much of coaching is developed in a way to make you productive, to give you more to do, or what we really need actually is having some clarity, being witnessed, being validated, and not have to mask and perform. And then it has a huge there needs to be a huge lived experience understanding, somatic trauma informed approaches for how we discharge our energy in therapy. Oops, sorry. I went very fast there. Post-diagnostic structured ongoing support is what people have asked for, and guidance on hormones, medication, emotional regulation, identity reintegration, because so many people feel like shapeshifters, and when they get diagnosed later in life, they don't know who they are. So what they very explicitly say, we don't need productivity hacks. Guess why? So let's go beyond diagnosis into humanity. Some of the things people have said is that the spaces that affirm our lived experience is very, very much needed without requiring us to prove it. So people want to be validated without having to perform. We don't want fixing, we want witnessing. And that is really great. Although I've got to say I had to fix my hormones and my med situation. Otherwise, I won't be able to level the playing field for me. And support must evolve across hormones, trauma cycles, and sensory thresholds. This is a big one that people have talked about. And that is really, really great to see all these results, because from my survey, I have used it to shape the AuDHD Intersectional scientific Totty framework that supports diagnostics and support in women. And so the Totty framework is very much about making what is invisible in the AuDHD women experience, to make it seen, understood, and integrated, because that's what people wanted. They wanted integration, they wanted to be witnessed, they wanted to be understood. And so the work that I do is very much about rewriting the diagnostic lens to teach the science of lived experience, because you can teach that if you do the research that encompasses what people truly need. And to integrate trauma, hormones, and neurobiology, that was what people wanted. And they said, to understand how the neurobiology interacts with daily or weekly or monthly, with hormonal changes that's happening, or changes that are happening at different life stages, whether it's, during pregnancy, after childbirth. The perinatal time is so important for neurodivergent women. And that is often the time when we either develop, symptoms like being very hypervigilant and also dissociative, and what can look like postnatal OCD, and postnatal anxiety that I had after 2 of my children were born. And I had the same both times, despite thinking the second time would be easier. So there is the deep need to understand how it all links up, and what does trauma look like? How does that impact your day-to-day? And, how do we go into support space when actually we have a really deep core need to feel safe, and not be re-traumatized? Because so many of us, I've said before in a previous video, many of us don't really need to find out what exactly happened or to overcome it. We need to actually just understand what happened and then move on. It's this framework also contains neuroaffirming ways of communicating. It provides post-diagnostic scaffolding, body literacy for masking and burnout, redefining success and productivity, because a lot of our survey results were also around the workplace, what people do when they're burnout, because burnout is such a big thing in the neurodiverse community. And more importantly, on a surface level, to understand what intersectionality means to everyone, because if we are all been given different roles in society, despite, no matter where we come from, then it has an impact on how we present ourselves and how we show up and how we continue to not be able to fit the criteria for assessments and getting the right support. This framework also gives you a systems of belonging, and largely it rehumanizes psychiatry. But inside my advanced practitioner training is I am translating what is the unconscious implicit experience into explicit models for practice, where we provide identity affirming diagnostics and support training, a person-centered understanding where it's very much centered on what the person has gone through, what kind of identity they have acquired, and how to tease that apart. So the unexpected impact of this is that the people who came to my last cohort, many of them are practitioners, but they're also AuDHD women. So they start to actually develop more self-trust and understand themselves more, because I think there is a reason why we come into this profession, to support other people. It's because we had needed the support, but how are we then also projecting into our work? That's the deeper layer of what I have found, perhaps like a year into doing this training, is many of the wounded healers, tend to have archetypes that may not necessarily be healthy for themselves. As in, are we trying to get validation from how well our clients do? And do we have our own stuff to work on? And that is a really bigger, deeper part of it that I would love to talk all day about it, but I need to move on. So there is a lot of science. There's a neuroscience, biology, hormones, trauma, and masking knowledge, and it's backed by lived experience research and practical application using the Totty framework, and really spotlight on the helpers archetypes when we come to do the integration circles after the sessions where we do the learning. And so the course backend looks like this. And that's one of the reasons why I was late. I was trying to take screenshots because I couldn't upload the video. So these are some of the modules that we have inside the AuDHD Advanced Practitioner training. So there's 6 modules. Each one has several more videos, and there's around 61 lessons. And one of my most popular module was the root causes of AuDHD, where we looked at nature and nurture. And there were so many people who said that really helped them understand entirely how AuDHD is manifested from the gene variants up until, co-occurring conditions, and, how that then presents in our day-to-day lives. And each video is very accessible. It's not long, maybe like as little as 1 minute in some, and as long as maybe 9 minutes in others. But yeah, this is our new course backend. There's a community space as well, but I didn't manage to do the screenshot. It's definitely there. And we are opening the community space for people who are joining this time, but I'm also bringing the last cohort in as well, because our last cohort was run live the whole time. And I also created the first intersectional care network, where it is a trusted directory for whole person ADHD and AuDHD affirming care. Because throughout the years of doing community events, one question that I keep getting asked again and again is, who do I go for diagnosis if I want to be seen? Because so many women have been turned away or dismissed, and worse actually, if they pay the full cost of the assessments and then being told that they don't have the diagnosis. Like they're paying a few £1,000s for it and then actually being dismissed. That just feels wrong. I'm not saying that everyone should get a diagnosis when they pay for something, but they were so sure that they were autistic ADHD, but they were turned away, and there was a lot of trauma in that. And so I created an intersectional care network so that people have somewhere to go and refer to people who have been trained by us, who are also AuDHD, ADHD affirming, who can understand intersectional experience, whether it's gender, class, and also science, evidence informed. Some of the people here are coaches, they're nurses, perinatal nurses, and psychiatrists, psychologists as well. Actually, there are quite a few based in the UK, but most of them also are based around the world. And I hope that this will keep expanding from here on. We have people in America, in Australia, in Switzerland, and Europe, and the UK. So it's really good start so far. And so so my next cohort is in November. It starts on November 4th. It's a 6 weeks course, and there are 4 community circles that I've thrown into it, because our last cohort had said that the 6 weeks wasn't enough because at the end of it, people wanted more and they wanted to stay on, but I didn't have the facilities at the time. So we then now create the communities. So we have the space for people to integrate and ask questions. It's a bit of a supervision, peer discussion, and it's also optional, the 4 circles after that. But I plan to create more of an ongoing support circle after this. So it will, I will probably need a couple of weeks to do that. So this training combines both lived experience and science. Thank you so much, Katie. Yeah, I have been very, very teary when I put the care network out because it was the thing I wish I had. And perhaps it's funny now saying that in hindsight, but I wish that I had that level of support when I was going into the autism assessment, which obviously wasn't like that, and because that's the whole reason why I created it. But it does help a lot for people to feel like there's confidence in actually being seen and being told like where to go. If not, rather than just say, nope, that's not you. See you later. Goodbye. So that was my experience. So I had to fight that. So you get certification, the Totty framework that I talked about before, community supervision, referral via the care network, and these lovely little badges. Next cohort begins on the 4th of November, and we have 2 sessions, either in the morning for people who are on the other side of the world or the UK, if they wish, or 4:30 p.m. UK time for people who are based in the States or Canada and other places. So gain your professional CPD certification and join a movement to rehumanize practice. And our past cohorts has said a lot of things, but I thought I just put 2 really strong testimonials out here. My thing was Sarah, who was a CBT practitioner, just a psychotherapist, who said this training needs to go mainstream. And we all know how long things take in the mainstream in the NHS sector. And that is why I'm hoping by doing this on the side, whether it's, from my bedroom, that eventually this is going to go out there into the NHS, and it's going to create a better impact. And Dion D. Crick has actually said this training should be mandatory for anyone working with female ADHDers. D is like me, a global majority woman who actually I have felt seen too whilst delivering this training because of the results that we received from the survey, and understanding intersectional representation was so comforting. And I think that's what Dee felt about it too, that it helped her really see the nuances, and then we can apply that knowledge, to support other people. And yeah, lastly, why do you want to work with me? You can work with anyone, but I just want to say from my perspective, I have transformed and grown so much since I first started ADHD Girls. And I've done this alongside the community, and the community work is where I truly feel so happy and belong. And during the hardest times of my life, I had wanted to create a community event so that I have someone to talk to. And it sounds, tough, but actually there is really no replacement for someone who truly understands your experience. And I don't often feel like I have that in my, friendship circle. So it has been so nice to meet neurodivergent friends and community. And you've seen here, I gradually transformed from someone who really just talk about the science and the stories to actually doing nervous system regulation, which I really didn't know that I had the courage for. And it was something I was very open to everyone at the Neurodivergent Phoenix that I just hosted 2 weeks ago. I was just doing what I felt needed, and I didn't know how to do it. I just thought I would attune to everyone and follow and go with the flow. And that evening, we did a lot of co-regulation exercises whilst, I was also teaching. And then it was the singing that we did at the end that people truly, truly felt the impact. Because I was talking about how the AuDHD nervous system is different to the ADHD one, where a lot of that is about regulation. because so much of what we experience on a day-to-day basis is containing what is internalized inside us, whilst we're generating these strong emotions inside. It is about releasing that. And I found in my journey that there's nothing like singing that combines, that you can feel down to the cell in your body. And for that, we were in a lovely venue, and I thought, oh, this is something I like to do. And we will do the Phoenix again, but for now, I think it's the monthly community circles that I will do from next year, whether it's online or in person. So this is certainly something that I'll be taking on. And so the ways that you can work with me is to fast track your AuDHD practitioner knowledge and training. My cohort starts November 2025. I talked to you about a community because some people have said, they wanted to join a community. And so I decided I will launch one from February 2026 with ongoing support and resources. So let me know if you're interested. And also, if you want to learn how to personalize your AuDHD, I do work one-on-one with people, but that's a more higher price ticket item where I will support someone with their health, their career, and their relationships. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. These are the resources that I have put together. You are very welcome to get my book. I think it's on sale because it was just released 2 weeks ago? Yeah. And it has a lot about ADHD. And actually, you'll see me questioning what is going on in my body when I was going through medication side effects and not know what to do. And you'll see my journey coming back to wellness. And then after I finished the book, I then created the training program for autism and ADHD. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions, please let me know. But these are some of the links that I've just posted here. Oh my God, I have. Oh, sorry about that. I just kind of posted the link all together. So yeah, I hope you can see that. So I'm going to label that properly. Yeah, let me know if you have any questions. I have a couple of more minutes before I need to pick up my kids. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to sign up for the community that I will launch in February, please feel free to. I've reposted the link again, but I will look at all your comments, and if you have any questions, feel free to post it in the event page and I will answer it. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's just thanks Nina. Honestly, I think so much of what I went through had helped inform my work, and I don't think I would be able to do half the work if things didn't happen to me. So I guess it all happened for a good reason. Thank you. Thanks, Victoria. Yeah, do you want to leave me an Amazon review? My publisher keeps saying, can you please get people to review on Amazon? Thank you. Okay, so Dr. Asad Rafi has asked, can you advise how the AuDHD nervous system is different to ADHD? So it's different in the sense that with ADHD, you have a nervous system that is, I guess it is more, chaotic, and it's used to that chaos. Whereas the AuDHD nervous system is both structured and it can be chaotic, but even more than ADHD. So a lot of time with ADHDers, it's about generating energy through things that you're interested in, you're passionate about, that your nervous system is going to go, oh, I'm lighting up. It's about generating the energy, so we can take ourselves from start to finish, if that's possible for ADHDers. But the AuDHD nervous system, we are pretty much trying to figure out how to be balanced at any one time. We are containing a lot of energy. We are trying to go from sometimes not stimulated to very stimulated and then trying to get it back. So it's a nervous system that is in flux. It's containing energy and it needs to release energy, because so much of what we go through is contained, and because of the autistic side in the neurobiology. Because I think I talked about this when I spoke to Dr. Jolene Brighton. the autistic woman's brain is not as globally connected as an autistic man's. And so each of the brain networks work really well on their own, but they don't connect as much. So what I tend to find that when I started ADHD medication as an AuDHD woman, those networks start to connect, you know? And what did happen was all of a sudden I was tapping into spaces that I didn't even know existed before, or, maybe before I wasn't able to speak as fluently. And then on medication, it was like just nonstop speaking. So there was something there. And so when I discovered the research that the women's neurobiology is different to men's, that was so fascinating to me. And that makes so much sense, because then you think about girls and boys from a young age, how we, definitely didn't present the same way, but also boys found it so much harder to hide it, because they were feeling every single sensory input, emotions and thoughts as an assault to their nervous system, because everything was colliding into one and they had to express it. Whereas for ADHD girls, we're like, contain, mask, become someone else. And then you get to my age and we're like, who am I? That's definitely my experience, and so many women we've spoken has said the same as well. Thank you, everyone. I'll reply to you afterwards. I need to collect my kids now. They're in my friend's house, and I love that we were together today. It felt really nice. This was nice co-regulating experience. Thank you. I hopefully can upload this onto the YouTube channel, and don't forget to look at the links if you want to sign up to the community later, or if you want to do my program that starts on the 4th of November. Okay. Yeah, dysautonomia is very common. That is the nervous system influx and the collision. Yeah, definitely nervous system regulation. See you later. Bye.